I still remember the exact sound my little sister's head made when it hit the kitchen tile while she was seizing. It wasn't a sharp crack or a loud bang. It was a sick, heavy thud that kept repeating in a horrible rhythm. Every time her body jerked, her head followed, and that sound echoed through the whole kitchen like a nightmare I couldn't wake up from. Mia was only 9 years old, tiny enough that her limbs looked too fragile for what her body was doing. Her arms twitched violently, her legs kicked out in sharp spasms, and foam started building around her mouth as she gasped for air she couldn't fully pull in. Her eyes rolled back until all I could see were the whites, and something inside me cracked with pure terror. I was 15, old enough to understand this was serious, young enough to feel helpless and desperate. The kitchen lights were too bright, almost harsh, making everything feel surreal. My hands were shaking so badly I almost dropped the cordless phone when I grabbed it. I didn't think. I didn't hesitate. I did what any person with a beating heart would do. I tried to call 911. I punched in 9, then 1. And right as I pressed the second 1, a hand grabbed my wrist so violently I gasped. It felt like electrical shock shooting all the way up my arm. I turned expecting maybe my mom in a panic. Instead, it was Derek, my stepfather, towering over me with a face twisted in anger, not fear, not concern, not confusion, anger. He leaned in closer, breath hot and sour like old coffee, and growled, "You're not calling anyone." I froze. For a moment, I genuinely didn't understand what he meant. Mia was on the floor behind him, convulsing. Her body was jerking in unnatural ways no 9-year-old should ever experience. Why would he stop me from calling for help? I tried to pull my wrist back, but his fingers tightened, digging into bone. "Derek, she's not okay, I need to." Before I could finish, he ripped the phone out of my hand, so fast it felt like he tore skin off with it. He threw it across the kitchen, and it shattered into pieces when it hit the refrigerator. The crash made me flinch, but Mia didn't react. She couldn't. Her heel slammed into the floor with another thud that made my stomach twist. Derek leaned down until his face was inches from mine. I could smell his breath. I could feel his anger radiating off him like heat from an oven. "If you call anyone," he said, slow and deliberate, "I promise you will regret it for the rest of your life." Do you understand me? I didn't. Not in that moment. I didn't understand anything. Why wasn't he helping her? Why was he treating me like the enemy? Why did calling 911 make him furious when his daughter was literally fighting for her life? My voice came out small, shaky. I just need to help her." He didn't blink. He didn't soften. If anything, he looked even more irritated, like Mia's seizure was an inconvenience he'd been forced to deal with. "She is fine," he snapped. "It'll stop on its own." But it wasn't stopping. The foam around her mouth was getting thicker, bubbling. Her breaths were short and sharp, her chest barely rising. She made a strangled, choking noise that made every instinct in my body scream at me to do something. I looked at her, then at him, then back at her. My heart was pounding so hard I could barely hear anything else. "Derek, she's not breathing right?" I said, the panic breaking through my voice. He finally looked down at her, not with fear, not with worry. He looked annoyed. "She's had these before," he said, shrugging like he was talking about a scraped knee. The words knocked the wind out of me. "Before? When? Why didn't anyone tell me? How could this be treated like nothing?" "What? Why didn't you tell me?" I stammered. "She could die." He snapped his head back toward me so quickly I stumbled. "Shut your mouth," he snarled. "You don't know what you're talking about." His voice was sharp enough to cut. He stepped forward, crowding me, blocking my view of Maya like he was guarding her from me. "You're not calling anyone," he repeated. "If you do, you'll wish you hadn't." Fury tangled inside me until I felt sick. I hated him in that moment, truly hated him, but hate didn't matter. If I pushed him, if I tried to run, I knew he would hurt me. He already had. My wrist throbbed. I could feel swelling starting. I could feel my pulse pounding against the bruises he left. I stood there trembling, watching my little sister's body slam against the tile while her face turned pale and her breaths became shorter and weaker. I had never felt so helpless in my life. Derek stood in front of her, arms crossed, acting like he was standing guard over a secret instead of a dying child. I swallowed hard, my mind racing. If I didn't do something fast, she might not survive. I didn't know how, and I didn't know when, but I knew one thing with absolute certainty. I had to get help. Even if it meant going through him. Even if it meant risking whatever he threatened. Because she wasn't going to make it much longer. And he wasn't going to lift a finger. The moment I realized Maya's breaths were getting shorter, Something inside me snapped into a kind of cold, desperate focus. Fear didn't go away. It just became something sharp, something pushing me forward instead of holding me down. Derek stood there like a brick wall, blocking access to the counter. The back door, the broken phone, even Mia. He wasn't watching her anymore. He was watching me, waiting for me to try something so he'd have an excuse to clamp down harder. He always needed control. That was his oxygen. And right then, he saw my sister's seizure not as an emergency, but as a threat to that control. I kept my voice small and my posture stiff, because any sign of defiance made him explode, and I couldn't afford an explosion with Mia already fighting for her life. "Can I at least check if she's hurt her head?" I asked carefully, swallowing the bitterness in my throat. His eyes narrowed slightly. "She's fine," he snapped again, turning just enough to glance at her before switching his glare right back to me. These things happen. They stop on their own. But he was wrong. I knew he was wrong. I could see it in the way her breathing stuttered every few seconds, like her body was trying to remember how to function. I could see it in the color draining from her face, in the way her heels weren't striking the ground as hard anymore. The seizure wasn't stopping. It was weakening her. I stepped to the side as casually as I could, pretending to inch closer to Mia, but Derek shifted to block me. He was taller, broader, and stood with his feet planted like he was prepared for a fight. "Back up," he barked. My jaw clenched, but I stepped back. He watched me for another full 5 seconds, making sure I knew who was in charge. He always did things like that. Long, uncomfortable pauses meant to remind me I had no power in this house. But while he was busy posturing, something important slipped into place in my mind. I didn't need the phone in the kitchen. My mom's old cell phone was in the laundry room, because it didn't hold a charge anymore. She kept it plugged into the wall, using it only to play music. It wasn't much, but even if the battery lasted 30 seconds, 30 seconds was long enough to call 911. I just needed an excuse to move. I needed to get him out of my way without setting him off. And I needed to do it fast, because Maya's spasms were slowing. But the choking noises in her throat were getting worse. Panic clawed at my ribs, but I pushed it down. I had to stay calm. I had to think. The laundry room was down the hallway. He would follow me if he saw me walking there. I needed him to look away for just a second. 1 second might be enough. "Can I get a towel?" I asked, forcing my voice to crack a little, like fear was overwhelming me. She keeps hitting her head. We should put something under it." Derek hated appearing incompetent. If something sounded like basic common sense, he usually agreed just so he wouldn't look foolish. He paused, jaw shifting side to side as he considered it. Finally, he grunted, "Fine. But you're not leaving this room." That answer wasn't what I wanted, but it wasn't hopeless. "There's one in the drawer," I said, pointing deliberately to the cabinet on the far side of the kitchen. I needed him to walk away. Just a few steps. Just enough distance for me to move. Derek huffed and turned toward the drawer, the one stuffed with random dish towels my mom collected. The moment his back was turned, even partially, I moved. Not fast enough to look suspicious, but not slow enough to waste precious time. I circled around the opposite side of the island counter, staying low so the counter blocked me from his peripheral vision. The second I was out of his direct line of sight, I bolted. My heartbeat roared in my ears. My injured wrist throbbed with every step. I sprinted into the hallway silently, years of walking on eggshells having trained me to move without noise. I heard Derek rustling through the drawer behind me. "Where the hell are these damn towels?" he muttered, slamming something shut. I didn't wait to hear more. I dove into the laundry room and shut the door as quietly as possible. My hands shook as I lunged for the phone sitting on the shelf above the dryer. It was plugged into the wall, the screen black, the battery probably almost dead. But I pressed the power button anyway. The screen lit up. One glowing bar of battery. One bar was all I needed. My thumb hovered over the emergency call button. I didn't breathe. I didn't blink. I didn't think. A dial tone filled my ear. The longest second of my life passed. Then a voice clicked on. 911, what's your emergen? And that was when the laundry room door slammed open so hard it hit the wall. Derek stood in the doorway, chest heaving, eyes blazing with a rage I had never seen before. For half a second, we just stared at each other. Me holding the phone to my ear, him recognizing instantly what I had done. "My sister is seizing," I blurted into the phone, my voice shaking violently. "She's not breathing right. She needs help." Derek lunged. He crossed the room in 2 strides, ripping the phone out of my hand while roaring something incoherent. The phone clattered to the floor, breaking apart. The 911 operator was still faintly audible from the speaker. "Hello. Are you safe? Can you repeat?" Derek stomped on the phone with his heel until the voice cut off. I stumbled backward, hitting the dryer, heart slamming against my ribs, his face twisted with fury. "What did I tell you?" he thundered. I didn't answer. I couldn't. My mind was spinning, my breath coming in sharp, panicked gasps. He stepped closer, raising his hand like he was about to strike me. But then, from the kitchen, a sound. A sound that froze both of us. Maya had gone silent, no convulsions, no gasps, no choking noises, just silence. And that silence was so much worse than the seizure. The silence coming from the kitchen didn't feel like relief. It felt like the air was ripped out of the house. My heart stopped before my body did. Even Derek froze, his hand still halfway raised like he'd forgotten what he was about to do. That stillness lasted only a second, but it was long enough for terror to crawl up my spine and choke me. I didn't wait for him to say anything. I didn't wait for permission. I shoved past him so hard he stumbled, and I sprinted down the hallway toward the kitchen. My sock slid on the hardwood, but I caught myself on the doorway and pushed forward. The sight that met me knocked the wind out of my lungs. Mia wasn't moving. Her little arms lay limp at her sides. Her hair was spread across the tile in a messy halo. Her eyes were half open, unfocused, staring at nothing. Her chest rose only slightly every few seconds, shallow, barely, their breaths that made my own breathing falter. I dropped to my knees so fast I didn't feel the pain of hitting the tile. "Mia, Mia, can you hear me?" My hands hovered above her, scared to touch but terrified not to. Her skin looked pale, almost gray around her lips. I felt a wave of pure panic crash over me, violent and cold. Derek arrived a moment later, breathing hard from anger rather than fear. He stood over us like he was supervising something trivial, not witnessing a medical emergency. "She's fine," he muttered again, but it sounded weaker this time. Less certain. I snapped my head toward him, anger boiling so hot it broke through the fear. "Stop saying that!" I shouted, my voice cracking. "She's not fine! Look at her!" He didn't. He didn't move. He didn't kneel. He didn't touch her. He just stood there with his arms stiff at his sides, jaw clenched so tightly the muscle pulsed under his skin. It hit me then, really hit me, that he wasn't going to help. Not now. Not ever. Everything that mattered in this moment depended entirely on me. My hands trembled as I carefully turned Mia onto her side. Her breathing hitched, then steadied just a little. Relief washed over me, but it was thin and fragile. I tried to remember first aid steps I'd learned from some health class poster, but my mind was racing so wildly everything felt jumbled. "Stay with me," I whispered to her, brushing her hair off her forehead. "Please, Mia, please. I needed another phone. Any phone." Derek was still blocking the doorway. I could feel his presence like a shadow behind me. I tried to stand, but he stepped forward, grabbing my arm again. Same wrist as before, digging his fingers into the bruise he'd already made. Pain shot through my arm and I bit back a cry. "You're done," he growled. "I told you not to call anyone. You disobeyed. That's it?" My voice came out raw, furious. "She can't breathe, right? She could die." He tightened his grip, pulling me closer until his face hovered inches from mine, rage radiating off him like heat. I said no one needs to know about this. That sentence chilled me more than anything. No one needs to know. Like Mia's life was some secret mistake he needed to cover. Like she was an embarrassment instead of a child who needed help. Something snapped inside me, not in panic this time, but in defiance. In clarity. I yanked my arm out of his grip with a strength I didn't know I had and planted myself between him and my sister. I was shaking so hard I could barely stay upright. But I met his eyes without backing down. "I don't care what you say," I whispered fiercely. "I'm getting help." His face twisted, and I knew he was seconds away from grabbing me again, maybe worse. But that was when I heard it, 3 faint knocks on the front door. My body stiffened. Derek's eyes darted toward the living room. Someone was here. Someone who might hear. Someone who might see. Derek swore under his breath. A harsh hiss of panic he didn't want me to hear. I didn't move from my spot. I didn't breathe. He stormed out of the kitchen, leaving me with Mia. The moment he disappeared around the corner, I leaned forward and pressed my forehead gently against hers. "Hang on," I whispered. "Please hang on." Voices floated in from the entryway. A woman. Then another voice, deeper, maybe a neighbor's son. They were asking something. Then asking again, louder. I couldn't make out Derek's responses, but his tone was tight, forced, like someone trying too hard to sound normal. I turned toward the hallway. If I was going to get help, this was my one shot. If Derek shut the door on them, if he sent them away, we'd be alone again. And I wasn't sure Maya had minutes left, let alone hours. I needed them to know something was wrong. I needed them to hear me. I stood slowly, my legs trembling under me, and crept toward the living room. The voices were still talking. I stepped into the hallway, careful not to make noise. Then I saw the front door was cracked open. Derek stood half inside, blocking most of the doorway, his broad back hiding the view of the kitchen. "Everything's fine," he was saying, his voice rigid. "Just a little accident. We've got it handled." He moved to close the door. And that was my moment. I ran. I sprinted down the hallway and slammed into Derek's back with everything I had. He stumbled forward unexpectedly, thrown off balance by the force. The neighbors' eyes snapped up. Confusion washed over their faces. I grabbed the edge of the doorframe and screamed. Actually screamed. With every ounce of breath I had. "Help! My sestar. Sis nambares ich. Pas help us!" Derek whipped around, face twisted with rage and disbelief, but it was too late. The neighbors pushed past him into the house. One of them, a woman in her 40s, rushed straight toward me. "Where is she?" she demanded. I pointed toward the kitchen, tears streaming down my face, but before I could speak again, I heard heavy footsteps behind us. Derek lunged. Not at the neighbors. At me. The moment Derek lunged at me, everything turned into a blur of instinct and raw fear. His footsteps thundered against the hardwood, and I felt the vibration travel up through my legs before I even turned around. I barely had time to flinch before his hand clamped down on my shoulder, fingers digging into the fabric of my shirt hard enough to pinch skin. But before he could yank me backward, the neighbor's son, a guy in his early 20s named Jordan, stepped between us, shoving Derek so hard he stumbled into the wall. "Back off," Jordan barked, eyes wide with shock and fury. "What the hell is wrong with you?" Derek recovered fast, but not fast enough to stop the neighbor woman, Mrs. Carter, from pushing past him into the kitchen. "Where is she?" she demanded again, and this time I sprinted behind her. When she saw Maya on the floor, her face drained completely. "Oh my God," she whispered, dropping to her knees beside my sister. "Jordan, call 911 right now." I felt something in my chest loosen. Like a metal band that had been squeezing my lungs finally snapped. Someone else was calling. Someone Derek couldn't stop. But Derek wasn't done. He stormed into the kitchen after us, fury twisting his features into something monstrous. "Nobody is calling anyone!" he roared, stepping toward Jordan, who was already dialing. "Put the phone down." Jordan didn't even look up. "No," he said, steady and loud. "Step away from me." Derek reached for him again, but Mrs. Carter shot up faster than I ever expected, positioning herself between Derek and her son. She wasn't tall, but the look she gave him was a warning. A serious one. "If you touch my boy," she said through clenched teeth, "I will press charges so fast your head will spin." Derek hesitated, not because he respected her, but because he realized suddenly he was outnumbered, outmatched, out of control, and losing control was the one thing he never tolerated. He pointed at me instead, spit flying from his mouth as he screamed, "This is your fault. You don't listen. You make everything worse." I stepped back, heart pounding, but something inside me had changed. Maybe it was adrenaline, maybe it was seeing Mia lying there so fragile, maybe it was the realization that Derek was actually afraid now. Afraid of witnesses, of consequences, of everything he'd tried so hard to hide. Whatever it was, I didn't flinch the way I used to. I met his eyes and held them. "I didn't do anything wrong," I said softly. "I just tried to save her." That sentence felt like crossing a line I'd been terrified to approach for years. Derek's face went red, but before he could respond, Jordan's voice cut through the tension. "Yes, she's still breathing. But it's shallow, yes. She had a seizure, no. We don't know how long, okay. Okay." He hung up, breath shaky but relieved. "They're on the way," he said. That was the moment Derek lost whatever scraps of control he had left. He lunged at Jordan, roaring with frustration, and Mrs. Carter screamed for him to stop. But Jordan was quicker this time. He dodged Derek and shoved him backward. Derek stumbled into the counter, knocking a stack of pans to the floor in a noisy cascade. The chaos made my heart hammer even faster, but I refused to look away from Maya's small body lying on the tile. I knelt beside her again, brushing hair from her forehead with trembling fingers. Her breaths were still shallow, uneven. I whispered, "Help is coming, please, just hold on a little more." Mrs. Carter knelt on the other side, holding Maya's hand. "Sweetheart, you're going to be okay," she murmured, though her voice shook. In the background, Derek paced like a caged animal, running his hands through his hair, as he muttered curses under his breath. Every few seconds he shot a murderous glare at me, but he didn't dare move again, not with 2 witnesses watching him like hawks. "He tried to stop you from calling, Mrs. Carter asked quietly, still focused on Mia. I nodded. "Twice. He broke 2 phones. Her jaw tightened. "That man is going to answer for this." I felt something flicker inside me. Hope, thin and fragile but real. Then, faintly at first, we heard its sirens. Getting closer. Growing louder. Derek froze like a startled animal. His eyes darted toward the front door, then the back. He looked like he was calculating escape routes. Mrs. Carter noticed it too. "Don't even think about it," she said sharply. "Police are coming with them." Derek's face twisted again, not in anger this time, but fear. Real fear. He backed up into the corner of the kitchen, chest heaving, sweat beading on his temple. "This is blown out of proportion," he muttered. "She's fine. She's had these before." "You didn't call for help," Jordan snapped. "You tried to stop her from calling." "What kind of understand?" Derek shouted. He wasn't. "This isn't. She's exaggerating." But his words fell flat. The moment the police and EMTs burst into the house, everything happened fast. EMs rushed past us, dropping to their knees beside Maya, checking her airway, her oxygen levels, her pulse. They worked quickly, efficiently, lifting her gently onto her side, placing a soft block under her head, preparing equipment. I stepped back, dizzy with relief and fear mixing together. A police officer pulled me aside, asking what happened, and for the first time in my life, I told everything. Not just the seizure. Not just the phones. Everything. Derek's threats. His grip. The times he'd done it before. Every word poured out like a dam breaking. Jordan backed me up. Mrs. Carter backed me up, and when the officer turned to Derek, asking him to step into the living room, Derek tried to argue, but the officer wasn't having it. "Sir, step into the other room. Now." Derek finally obeyed, but not before casting one last furious look at me. Like everything crumbling around him was my fault. But for once, his glare didn't make me shrink. I stood tall. My voice didn't shake. My knees didn't buckle. Because this time I wasn't alone. This time someone believed me. And this time, Mia was getting help. As the EMTs lifted my little sister onto the stretcher, oxygen mask secured over her face, one of them turned to me and said, "You did the right thing." I choked back tears. Because for the first time, I actually believed it. What happened after the truth came out wasn't healing. It was a slow, violent unmasking of everything I thought I understood about family, survival, and loyalty. When the social worker closed her notebook and told me, in a calm, measured voice, that none of this was my fault, something inside me cracked open. Not in a dramatic way. Not like a movie where the hero suddenly breathes again. It was quieter. Like a window finally opening in a room I'd been suffocating in. Mia was still in the hospital, still sedated. Still hooked to machines that beeped in ways I pretended not to understand, but secretly memorized. I sat in that cold plastic chair for hours, knees pulled to my chest, staring at the rise and fall of her breathing. Nurses came and went, doctors updated charts, but the room never felt like it belonged to me. It felt borrowed, temporary, like any minute someone would tap me on the shoulder and say, "Okay, you can leave now. She's not your responsibility," except she was. She always had been. She was the one person who anchored me, even when I was drowning. When the detective came in, he spoke to me gently, like I was made of scrap paper, like something fragile that might tear if he handled it wrong. "We need your full statement," he said, sitting down across from me. "Everything your stepfather did. Everything you saw." I didn't want to talk. Not because I was hiding anything, but because saying it out loud made it real. It meant admitting that my life wasn't normal or difficult or complicated. It was abusive. And I didn't want that word. But the truth didn't care what I wanted. So I told him everything. I told him about the times Derek shoved me into walls. The way he'd yank Mia by the arm so hard she'd bruise. The way he'd make us sit in silence at the dinner table while he drank. The way he'd call me useless when I didn't react fast enough. The way Mom watched it all and did nothing. When I finished, the detective nodded slowly, like he already knew most of it. But then he said something nobody had ever told me in my entire life. "You did the right thing." I didn't respond. I didn't know how. Right things didn't exist in our house. Only survival did. Later that day, a woman from CPS took me into another room and said they were arranging temporary foster placement. The floor fell out from under me. "No," I said immediately. "Please. I need to stay with my sister." The woman gave me that pitying look adults always give when they're about to deliver a "for your own good." Decision. We can't place you with her right now, she said carefully. She needs medical care. You need safety. I'm safe with her, I argued. She's safe with me. Your stepfather threatened your life, she reminded me. Your mother allowed it to continue. That home isn't safe. You can't go back there. Hearing it from someone official, someone with authority, made it hit harder. I wasn't going home. Mia wasn't going home. And somehow, that was both the scariest and most relieving thing I'd ever felt. They placed me with a foster family that night. A quiet older couple, with a clean living room, and a scent that reminded me of laundry detergent. They tried to make me feel comfortable, offering me food, blankets, a warm shower. I thanked them, but the entire time I felt like I was floating outside my own body. My real life was the hospital. Mia, the machines. Not this sterile, too kind house. I barely slept. Every time I closed my eyes, I replayed the moment Mia fell. The way her body jerked like she was trapped inside herself. The sound of her skull hitting tile. Derek's hand crushing my wrist. His voice, low, bitter, threatening me while my sister convulsed on the floor. By morning, the foster mom knocked softly on the door and told me the detective had called. They'd arrested Derek. I didn't feel relief. Just emptiness. Like I'd been waiting for someone to tell me it was safe to breathe again, but my lungs didn't remember how. At the hospital, they allowed me to visit Mia, but only under supervision. She looked so small under the blanket, her hair tangled, her breathing shallow but steady. I held her hand, careful not to disturb the IV taped to her arm. "Hey, Bug," I whispered. "I'm right here. I'm not going anywhere." She didn't respond, still sedated. But her fingers twitched faintly against mine, like her body recognized me even if her mind couldn't. When Mom finally showed up, she didn't run to Mia. She didn't collapse in guilt. She didn't cry. She barely even looked at her. Instead, she marched straight toward me, eyes blazing. "What did you do?" she hissed. "Do you have any idea what happens now?"
"They think we're monsters! They think I'm a bad mother!"
Derek could go to jail. I stared at her in disbelief. Mia was lying a few feet away, hooked to machines. And she was worried about her reputation. "Mom," I said quietly. "She almost died." "You're exaggerating," she snapped. "She's always had episodes. You didn't need to drag the whole government into our lives." I didn't say anything. I didn't trust myself to speak. Because for the first time in my life, I saw her clearly. Not as mom, not as caretaker. Not as victim of Derek's rage. But as someone who chose comfort over her children every single time. Someone who would rather protect an abuser than admit she failed us. A nurse eventually stepped in and asked her to leave, said the room needed to stay calm for the patient's sake. Mom stormed out, muttering insults under her breath. And I just sat there, holding Mia's hand, realizing something with terrifying clarity. We were never going back. Not to that house. Not to that version of our family. Not to that cycle of fear. For the first time, the future wasn't a doorway I was scared to walk through. It was just unknown. Which, somehow, felt less terrifying than the life we'd been living. And as Mia slept, her heart beat steady on the monitor, I whispered the promise I should have made years ago, but finally had the strength to keep. "I'm getting us out. For good,